Gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Ask Me Anything of the Order of Man podcast. Today, I'm your host, Kip Sorensen, and I am not here with Mr. Mickler. Instead, I am here with Sean. Mr. Mickler is unable to join us today on this week's episode, and so Sean is stepping in and filling the gaps. Sean, why don't you give us a little background of who you are and your involvement with Order of Man, and then we'll just dive into these questions.
I'd love to. My name's Sean Villalobos. I am married, 4 children, been married 20 years. I have been in the Iron Council for 2 years now and started following Ryan. Just actually saw him on somebody else's podcast. I'm like, oh man, I like this guy. I got to start listening and become part of the movement. We just did a meetup out in Southern California for the Order of Man. And yeah, that's it. I have an agency across the country of over 4,000 reps in leadership developments. My focus is on helping people, through our business. We end up basically counseling people on everything, their faith, their family, their finances, fitness, everything. So
yeah,
glad to be
love
here.
It. What was a podcast, Sean, that he was on that you were listening to? Do you remember?
I do not remember.
Oh man, no. There's your opportunity to help that guy out.
I'm that guy that walks in my garage, 10 times a day and forgets why I walked in my garage.
Why you walked in there? Okay. Well, and I'm so bad. I mean, I'm horrible when it comes to like authors and quotes, which is the worst, right? Because it's like someone gave their blood, sweat, and tears to do something amazing. And I'll be like, yeah, that was an amazing book. Who wrote it? Yeah, I have no idea. Yeah.
And
in
your brain,
do a better job at that.
But who knows how it got there?
Yeah. Copy. All right. So as you guys know, we're going to field questions. We're fielding questions today from the Facebook group. To join us on Facebook, go to facebook.com/group/Order of Man. And of course, you can follow Mr. Mickler on Insta and Twitter at Ryan Mickler. So we have one question from last week that Ryan suggested that I address, and it was from Manny Alvarez. He said, this question was for Professor Kip. I guess that's my new nickname. He says, what training outside jiu-jitsu do you recommend? So Manny, it's interesting. I would have, and this is a little bit of a disclaimer, I would have never said weightlifting until we had a guy in the gym that was just 100% focused on like bodybuilding. He was jacked and he had a gas tank like no other, and it didn't seem to impede his training whatsoever. But I think that's an anomaly. So from my opinion, I think functional training is the way to go. Kettlebell swings, Turkish get-ups, high reps, bursting of movement. I mean, if you follow, if you look up Jim Jones, my professors at our school are instructors for Jim Jones, and that type of training they got involved with because it complemented Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I would kind of lean in that direction. But here's the key thing too, is because here's the excuse or something that we hear often, and I want to shoot it down. Some guys were like, oh, well, I need to get in better shape and then I'll start doing. Don't fall into that trap. So anyone listening, it's like, oh, I better listen to this and get my act together and start working out, and then I'll train when I'm in shape. Don't do that. Just start training. And even if you're injured, you keep training. You just adjust how you're training, and you do it in a fashion that works for your current body type. And as that body type changes and you get in better shape, awesome. But you still need to learn the technique, right? So don't use that as an excuse to hold you back. But Manny, there you go. I would say pretty much any activity is a bonus. But the best training for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then second to that, I'd say is functional workouts. So, all right. Next question. And then I'm going to read these off and Sean's going to give us first pass on these bad boys. So Mark, Aaron, Charles, Bryant, what was your most defining moment, Mr. Sean? Most defining moment.
Ooh, most defining moment. It would have to be, I was 23 years old and I was at a conference in Las Vegas for what was my side hustle and is now my business. And I was full-time working in the studios at the time as a laborer. And my boss wasn't giving me the time off. He didn't allow me to go to this conference. I gave him months in advance. He wasn't going to let me go. I said, well, sorry, I'm going to go. You're going to have to figure it out. And I left. So I didn't know if I was going to come back with the job. And when I was at that conference, I had this realization that I hadn't been giving my everything. And financially, I was frustrated. My mom had just lost a job that she had for 18 years, and she was in a real bad spot financially and freaked out about her future. And I wanted to be able to put myself in a position to take care of her. And then I realized that I was kind of squandering this opportunity that was in front of me at this conference. And so I was staying in a room with like 12 other people at the Mandalay Bay in Vegas. And I was so broke that I didn't have money for food when I went to this thing. I had a good job. I was just so check to check and behind and in all this debt and in a bad situation. And so my strategy for eating during this conference was we luckily overlooked the pool at the Mandalay Bay. And so my strategy was to look for people that maybe I knew that were down at the pool eating. And then I was going to go and just happen to come across them and be like, hey, can I sit with you guys? And then
I need some of their fries. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to finish that. You're going to eat that. And so I was on like the third day or something like that. I think it was a 4 or 5 day conference. And I'm looking down and just having this realization. Earlier in the day, I heard from a guy who was taking care of his mom and had done these things and realized I just wasn't giving it my everything. I could have done more. There's way more I could have been doing and should have been doing. And I sat there in my board shorts looking down for someone I could eat with, and I couldn't find anybody. And I literally was like, why am I in this position? Why am I doing this to myself? I'm making it harder by not working my hardest. It's kind of that dichotomy. And I broke down. I cried probably 30 minutes by myself in this room. And then made the real decision. I had been doing it for about a year and just kind of half-assing it, and made the decision, no more. Enough is enough. There's no way I'm going to come to this conference next year and be in the same position. There's no way I'm going to continue to allow this to happen in my life. And after that breakdown, I sucked it up. I went down there. I actually didn't find anybody during that lunch break at the pool to end up eating with, but I was a new man. I was a new person. From that time forward, I gave it my absolute everything, literally left nothing on the field. And it changed my life. So it was one of those things. I did go back, by the way, and I lost my job a couple of weeks after getting back. My boss basically just gave me enough time to find somebody else. And this is a job I thought I could never be fired from, because I was his number one, field supervisor at this job. And I was gone, and I ended up sleeping in my car for almost 6 months after that. And, just financially, but I'd never felt better, never felt more excited, never, because I knew where I was headed. I was so sure that I was going to do what I committed to do in that room.
Yeah, you're fully committed to what you're working on. Let me ask you this: was being at the conference and seeing other people killing it part of that process where you're like, you know what I mean? Like, why aren't I in a position like these other individuals? Why am I scrapping here, looking for some food at the side of the pool? Was there an element of seeing what they're doing, or was it really just like, I'm out of integrity and I'm not committed to this, and I should be committed to whatever it is I'm committed to?
It was both. It was, seeing the proof that it works.
Yeah.
And then seeing it in people that were in my similar situation. And I think that's what gets most people. They see somebody killing it, that's doing great, that's not like them, that doesn't have their qualities. But this, being around them longer and hearing some of their stories, I started to realize I'm almost exactly like this guy, or this guy has my similar background, similar story. And it made me realize, like, I could do this. And but I'm not doing it. And all they did was,
why not
do what I know I can do.
Let me ask you one last question, then I'll share my defining moment. Was that an intellectual conclusion for you of like, why weren't you? Like, can you pinpoint that now? Like, why weren't you fully committed? Why weren't you giving it your all?
Yeah. And here's the thing is I was committed enough to be at that conference and to
Yeah.
tell my boss he was going to have to figure it out, which was really bold, right? Because I didn't know if
Yeah.
I was coming back to a job or not. So I was at least that committed, but there's that extra inch, right? That little bit more, and I heard real early in my career that little bit more is so small that it's scary to talk about. That the
Yeah.
difference between the $50,000 a year and the $500,000 a year guy is that little bit more, that little extra, that little, you can't even call it commitment. It's more conviction than
Yeah.
commitment. And so I realized I was committed, but I wasn't convicted. And
Yeah.
I needed to be convicted, all in, burn my boats, no looking
Yeah.
back. And that's what that did for me.
Totally. It's interesting because when we hire employees at the company I'm at, and when I do like quarter reviews with my team members, this is the question: is where's your commitment level? And are you fully committed or partially committed, or you're just supportive in your role? And the definition that I try to, that we kind of have a conversation around is that you could be supportive, right? I could show up and do my 8 to 5. I can do what's asked of me. But when I'm fully committed, I do what's necessary. Like it's different. It's not and it's kind of like the illustration. It's like not a 9 to 5 job. Like you're in it. Like, hey, whatever's going to need to be done, I'm going to do it because I'm committed to the desired outcome of what we're trying to accomplish. And it's actually, not only is it effective from that perspective, but it's refreshing. Like it's not like you're dragging these excuses or a backup plan with you, or, you know what I mean? It's like, you're not undermining what you're doing and wondering like, oh, this isn't going to work or whatever. You're just like, no, we're doing this. I'm all in. And then you kind of just don't look back. Would you say it's that same level of, would you define it the same way as I just did?
I would, as an employee, for sure. Yeah. And mine was a little different because I'm an entrepreneur. It's my business. It's, and so it's a little different. So you have to do it because no one else is going to do it or make up for it for you. But as an employee, that's important because most people work just hard enough to not get fired, and in return get paid just enough to not quit. And so every company wants those people that are committed beyond that. And there's a give and take. You can't have one without the other. And so you're always looking for that person that's going to step up and get stuff done no matter what. And then ironically, in return, they're going to end up getting paid more. They're going to move up in the company. They're going to do those things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, and that's maybe a conversation to have in the future if guys are interested, is like, how do you move an employee up that supportive or that commitment levels? I think there's some really fun strategy there. On this question, like, too. Yeah, it is an art. So my defining moment, I would actually, and here I go. I was mentioning already earlier that I can't reference authors. So I have no idea where I read this, but I read it somewhere. Some smart guy somewhere said something. And what it was is, or at least my definition or how I interpret it was, defining moments. People have defining moments in their life, and they're moments as though you can remember them as if they were tomorrow. It is clear as day. And in most cases, defining moments are when you saw the world a particular way and your state of being and mindset shifted. And most of the time, and I actually do believe this, I think most of the time defining moments are actually negative. I think that they are a scenario that occurs as a child. You realize something's wrong and you internalize it and saying, I'm not going to allow this to happen to me again. Right now, you could see where that might drive someone to have huge success in life, but you could also see where now they're taking the emotions of a 5-year-old and dragging it into their future, and they're 40 years old and they have a problem with something, all because of this defining moment that they've latched onto their entire life, if that makes sense. Now, I'm sure that's not what Mark's talking about. However, and I don't think all defining moments are necessarily negative, but one of the most defining moments of my life is when I was getting divorced. I was in the middle of the divorce process, and here's my story, right? Like, my wife's leaving me. I'm by myself. My world's falling apart. I don't have my kids. It's all her fault. I've done nothing wrong. This isn't justified. Woe is me, right? That's my mental state. And I remember, and some of you guys have already heard this, but I just started running all the time. It was like the only thing I could do to like get out frustration, and I don't know, I needed to do something. And so often I'd come home from work and I'd just run and run. And I'm not a runner, by the way, at least I wasn't before this. And I would just run. And sometimes I'd be sobbing and crying the whole time and cursing God of, why would you destroy my life? And I did all the things I was supposed to do. And I remember I was out west by Surprise, Arizona, out in the middle of the desert, just running. And I paused for a second, and I was just kind of, I don't know, I just got this instant moment of clarity. And I was just like, this is your fault. Every bit of it. She's leaving you because you're a bad husband. You didn't show up. You weren't, you were bringing nothing to the table. And it just, I got clarity of how much I was making this whole thing her fault and not mine. And it was, and the way I explained it, it was like a bad joke. It was like, holy crap, I am such an idiot. But it also, as we all know, when we take extreme ownership, it also empowered me, because I'm like, whoa, wait a second. If it is my fault, you know what? Then it's also within my control to be different, right? To show up differently in my life and make sure I don't do this again, right? That I don't experience the suffering or this internal grief that I was feeling at the moment. And that was a major change in my life, right? Because that was a change from victimhood to ownership. And as we all know, there is no growth in victimhood. And so that was probably one of the biggest defining moments, at least for me. So,
and what makes it defining is that there's one of two ways you could have gone. You could have made that choice to be a better man, or you could have continued to loathe in self-pity. And I think it's important. Like my friend Ed always says, things happen for you, not to you in your life. And it's those choices that you make in those defining moments that define who you become as a man. And, it's kind of like the struggle. I think of the story, The Butterfly, right? You always want help in those moments. You want someone to come in and save you. You want someone to give you the answers. You want someone to give support in those times, a lot of times, but it's the support, and it's someone helping you, and all of those things is not going to make you stronger. It's not going to get you to that breaking point where you make the decision you need to. You need that struggle to for Butterfly, it's that struggle is pumping the blood into their wings so that they are strong enough to be able to fly. And it's the same thing for us. And we have to remember that. And when it's happening, try and realize it, and realize we've got two choices, and we can go down this path of self-loathing, or we can go down the path to whatever it is, our financial freedom, our sovereignty, our leadership abilities, whatever.
Yeah, totally. All right, Jack Dean, we're going to get in some good questions here. As you know, I'm assuming you already heard the news last Thursday with our executive order. So of course this had to make its way into this.
I had that feeling too. I'm like, great, my first one. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
I know a question is going to come about the mandate.
Yeah. And I actually, I mean, we're probably 120 employees. And I was, I spent hours Thursday night going, all right, like what's what, right? And what is the details of this thing? So we can chat about that a little bit as well as part of this question. But so Jack Dean, his question, he says, you said anything. So here it goes. And it's not really a question. So, but I think we talk about the scenario a little bit because, let me read what he wrote, and then you can determine how you want to respond. If a vaccinated or unvaccinated person can still get and transmit the stupid virus, then what difference does it make if you are vaccinated or not? Makes zero sense. Yet people are being forced to take this thing. And so like I said, not really a question, but maybe just some initial thoughts. I actually flagged this question because out of all the comments that were posed, or all the questions that were posed, this one had a thread right underneath.
I was just going to say, I bet.
And here's the deal. And maybe, Sean, my apologies. Maybe I'll just kind of speak my piece really quick. So I read through these comments and everyone's going back and forth. Calling each other names. Where do you get your information from? Stupid. You're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. Like just back and forth. And here's the deal. Because I saw the noise about it and I thought, you know what? We got to be better critical thinkers than this. So I'm going to call you guys out, and I don't even have your names, but I'm going to call you out anyway. Here's the deal. Are any of you doctors or specialize in this technology as an expert? And the answer is no. Half the time, every opinion that anyone has is a form of regurgitation of information from somewhere else, right? Like Sean, you read something and you go, you critically think and you might agree, right? Now, you're still regurgitating information. And when you hop on Google and you do some Google search, it's confirmation bias. Of course, half the shit I see is going to be stuff that I already kind of agree with. We know that these algorithms exist in our world. And I'm not even taking a stance of like what's right and wrong here. What I am is taking a stance is what we need to stop doing is immediately attacking individuals for having a different point of view. Like, here's the reality. The problem in society today, I think the biggest problem we have is we don't debate. That we actually don't listen to someone else's point of view and go, that's interesting, Sean, but I read this study and said this. What do you think about that? And you and I have a dialogue and actually have a conversation, realizing that all the stuff you're bringing to the table is based upon research that you've done. It's not yours. It's someone else's information that you're regurgitating. I'm doing the same thing. Who knows if our sources are even valid sources? And let's have a conversation without actually attacking one another. That is what needs to happen. And from my opinion, the executive, this mandate, I think is complete BS, and I highly disagree with it. And I disagree with it. Why? Because the approach should be knowledge, communication, have the discussions. That's why I hate censorship of information or misinformation. Why? It's misinformation based upon whose opinion, right? The thing that this virus came out of a lab in Wuhan was considered conspiracy talk and was canceled for months. Oh, wait, we're wrong. No longer. It's like, whoa, you know what? That's the valid thing that should be happening. We should have conversations. We should have debates. And if Sean, you as a government official wants to convince me to do something, then why don't you actually bring some knowledge to the table and convince me? Not force me, not coerce me, not limit information for me to read. Actually, let's use some intelligence and let's get people to make the decision because we have a decent argument and we've had a debate about what's best. That is what needs to happen, not like canceling each other out. All right, there's my soapbox.
Absolutely. No, I'm on board with that 100%. And I saw a post on 9/11 yesterday. And what it basically said is I missed 9/12. And not the fact that that tragedy happened and we were kind of recovering from that as a country, but that we came together. And Republicans were hugging Democrats. You could have been a non-vaxxer or a vaxxer and you would have helped each other. It didn't matter. That day, none of that mattered. And, I think of this government works in such a strange way, and especially in our country, because we have what happens federally, and then we have what happens state to state. And a good example of that right now is with the ruling in Texas with abortion. And, that's people are flipping out about that too. And then they're flipping out about the vaccination mandates. And I'm with you. I don't agree with the mandate for the vaccinations, but I also don't totally agree with the mandate from Texas that you have to have an abortion, before a certain point, and that you cannot do it past, what was it? 6 weeks?
6 weeks. Yeah.
And by the way, I'm anti-abortion, right? Like I don't believe in abortion and that stuff. Now, do I believe it in certain cases? Yeah, rape, abuse, health issues for the mother, if it's a very high risk pregnancy and you could lose the child and the mom, then those circumstances to me are circumstantial, right? And it's something that needs to be prayed about, and for those families that they make that choice. But it's the same thing, my body, my choice, right, is what's screamed. And then those same people screaming that can say, no, you have to get this shot. There's hypocrisy there. And so again, and like Texas, and I'm going to get guys mad at me, especially here, about the thing in Texas. But again, it's to me government overreach on both cases. And
Agreed.
That's something that I would hope that we could agree on for that, because all of it impedes our freedoms, our choices, and all the things that our country was founded on.
And I've done so much federal government work as a consultant. I've worked with the military and the federal government. I can't think of the most inefficient organization that I've ever dealt with in my entire life. Right. So when I think like, oh yeah, let's give an organization in charge to like do something for like 250 million people, I'm like, yeah, horrible idea. Right. And I'm in the great state of Utah. And,
I was just going to say,
because I'm like, I hear stories of our friends in New York and they're like, man, the world's falling apart. I'm like, not where I live. We got this shit figured out. We're running smooth. Like, I don't need federal government telling me what we need to do in our local school. They don't know our kids. They don't know the details of of what we're doing in our neighborhood, or let alone within our state. But yet someone in Washington, D.C. knows what's best. Really?
Yeah.
Like this is basic chain of command kind of scenarios too, right? This is called delegation, right? And let the states govern themselves better. So I don't know. It's a crazy, I don't know. It makes me frustrated because so many people have an opinion of like, oh, council culture, it's so negative, but yet if it's okay to counsel in my space, right? It's okay to name call and shut other people up and attack them. I mean, here you go. You want to address something? Everyone learn how to debate appropriately and follow the rules of debate. Actually bring some logic to the table and have some valid conversation, and focus on not being right, but focus on trying to be the individual that can find the right answer.
Yeah. Well, listen how frustrated you sound, and you're in Utah. I'm in California. I mean, you want to talk about squandering our tax money, and as much taxes as we pay, and especially myself, right? I'm in the highest bracket, like that. It's ridiculous how much we pay for them to squander our money. And to deal with that. And then you have these politicians, like right now, they're trying to recall Gavin Newsom. We vote for that tomorrow. And then you look at the LA Times printed a piece calling Larry Elder, who's like the most likely candidate for the Republicans that's going to make it here. And they called Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy. That's what they printed. They put that, into front page news in the Times. It's ridiculous that that's the kind of propaganda that's being put out there. And again, this is not a Democrat or Republican thing. It's just if you're calling yourself the party of inclusion and tolerance, you're going to go call a black candidate the black face of white supremacy is not very tolerant, not very inclusive. And it's so that they can win, and so it's become more about winning and less about the actual issues, and trying to figure out, and I'll end with this, and then we can both get off the soapbox because we're getting a little fired up. But and even though the homeless thing is a big thing now, in my business, I sit with thousands of people all the time in different fields, in different areas. And I sat with this lady about 18 years ago who worked for a nonprofit in LA, and she worked with the homeless, and they had homeless shelters, not just shelters, but homes, like kind of like condos that they could live in and be in. And I asked her, I'm like, man, isn't it frustrating? There's not enough of these places for all the people that are out there. This is down near Skid Row. She's like, what are you talking about? There's plenty of places. It's not that there's not enough. It's that we can't get these people to want to stay here. And they get free housing, free showers, but there's rules that they have to abide by to be in these
follow the rules,
so that they don't get ruined, and they don't want to have to follow those rules to be in there. And so there's all this funding. It's not that there's not enough housing. It's that there's not enough people willing to do it. So they're not focusing the dollars in the right place. They just keep dumping money into programs that aren't working. It's, I mean, gosh, you want to talk about frustrating, and it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for some of you that don't know, because this is a public service announcement now. So this mandate, Biden is making the vaccine mandate go through OSHA, and OSHA has released zero details in regards to what this means. So as much as we got all this announcement of every employer with 100 employees has to blah, 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 there's zero details about it. So just so you guys know, like there's for us and for a lot of companies, there's nothing to do yet. We're still trying to figure out like what this looks like because OSHA hasn't put anything together. And between now and then, who knows how much lawsuits get fired up and who knows if this actually happens or not. So, but anyhow. All right. Darius Vaughn, where's a good place to purchase survival food and for emergencies? Any opinions on survival food for emergencies, Sean?
There's 3 different companies we use. What's it called? Provident Pantry is one. Yep. Mountain House. I think most people know about Mountain House. And then there's one, my daughter and my wife they have issues with gluten. They get really sick if they eat it. And so we have a lot of gluten-free stuff from Augustin Farms, I think it's called Augustin Farms. Okay. They make a lot of real good gluten-free food storage type of stuff too. You know, I don't know if
we have ones we use. Yeah, we have buckets and buckets of Wise food storage, WISE, Wise food storage. We mostly do all dry pack. After Katrina, I was kind of like, having a whole basement full of cans that you can't take with you is probably not the best bet for, if I need an exit strategy and light food to carry. So we mostly do dry pack. So it sounds like you too, because a lot of those foods are dry pack.
We have both. And then I'm also a different case because we actually have a property with a bunker, full of a year's worth of, food for our family and stuff like that. And that's kind of like our off set place.
Your off-grid place. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Michael Cooper, how do you improve your quality of life as fast as you can? Quality of life as fast as you can. I actually kind of like this question.
I like it too. You know what? You get better as fast as you can. I mean, really, that's it. And when you're doing it, it's when you first start, let's say that you see this with the IC, right? Guys come in there and most of them have never done much personal improvement. They haven't focused on it. And now they're making that decision. Okay, I need to get better. I need help. I need accountability. And so they've never gone down that path. And when you start, it usually seems fast if you're doing it right, because you make decisions it's twofold. You have to decide what you're going to do that you haven't been doing. And then you also have to decide, second, what you're going to cut out that's not serving you. I got that from Think and Grow Rich. When I first started my path 22 years ago, for self-improvement, that was one of the first books that was recommended to me that I read. And in that book, it says you have to decide exactly what you want. So first decide that exactly what you want in detail to where literally you could feel yourself in possession of it. Then second, and right after, you have to decide what you're going to give in return. So you have to get rid of those. And that could be, most people think of like, oh, I got to get rid of watching TV. And that's part of it. But what are you really going to give in return? Whether it's bad habits, whether it's some things that, that just aren't helping you get to your goals. And so I use my own example. For me, at 22 years old, I was a heavy drinker. That runs in my family. I was like a 6-pack a day guy at 22 in my other job. And it was kind of like normal. And in my family, culturally, it was just something everybody did. And so when I decided I wanted to change my life, I realized that wasn't going to serve me long-term. So I had to cut it out. So I quit cold turkey. My language, my filler words were the F word mainly. And when that felt too repetitive, I'd replace it with other 4-letter words. And to give you an idea, everyone in my family is either construction workers, sailors, or bikers. The only one we don't have is truck drivers. Right? So it's like, when it comes to being rough, they're pretty rough. And so I thought, man, if I'm going to be leading people, leading an organization, especially I'm in a financial services company, and financial services, I should probably clean up my language and the way I present myself, the way I speak. And so those were majors: how I spoke, drinking a ton, how I dressed, how I presented myself. And those were real major things. And you could tell instantly, people around me could tell, like, what's different with you? Something's different. It's off. I like it, but it's different. And so if you're doing it right, people are going to notice that quickly. So the fastest way, like I said, is to you get better as fast as you can. And then it stacks on what becomes important. So for me, it was business initially that made me make those changes. And then I realized, as I was leading into self-improvement, that, gosh, you know what? I don't really know what my faith is. I need to figure that out. I need to get stronger in that, because every successful person I've heard from talks about that. You know what? I need to get better as a family person. I was a young single guy, but I wanted to be married. I wanted to have kids. I wanted to have a, magnificent family life, because I didn't grow up with that. My dad wasn't around. My parents split. I watched my mom go through 3 divorces. My third stepdad or my second stepdad got shot on my 18th birthday. And so just by some other guy that was, bad off financially, in a bad spot, bad family life, all, his life falling apart. And so I thought, I've been so affected by negative family life, I want to have the opposite of that and those things. And so starting to think of that, what I wanted in my life, move me towards those things, but it was the initial step. And so it doesn't matter if you want to get healthy, you want your fitness to get dialed in, you start with that, and you'll be amazed at how that grows into all these other parts of your life. And then the last thing I'll say is, with that, you have to be putting good information into your brain and stopping the trash. So the fastest way, and for most people, it's cutting out the news, cutting out TV. Sorry if you like watching, binging on Netflix shows and stuff like that, but that doesn't really serve you. It doesn't help you get better. It doesn't help you improve, and definitely doesn't help you do it quickly. Cut out social media that doesn't serve you. Most people's social media time, they're not making money on it, right? Ryan probably spends a couple hours a day on social media because it's part of his income. It's part of growing the brand, growing the movement. He needs to be on there, but the average person just is going into the algorithms. Like you said, they're getting fed all this information that's really just going to make them angry. And, when you're angry and mad at stuff, you're probably going to take less action to do much about it. And so you got to cut that stuff out and replace it by good information, good books. And that's not going to be on social media in most instances. You got to listen to good podcasts. You have to read good books. You have to, take that information while you're taking it and come up with a game plan of how you're going to apply it in your life. And the combination of those things is what makes it happen faster.
Yeah, I like it. Well, and I think there's, for Michael, I get those. I totally agree with all those. But I want to give an idea too. You could do it right now.
Yeah.
You can have an amazing life right now for the next hour. And the way you do that, I think, Michael, is being fully present and having integrity. And what that means, and here's the shakeup. You're right. You want to have a great day right now. Pause and evaluate what relationships in your life are incomplete, that you have not addressed something that you should have been addressed, that you've pushed off because you don't want to do it because of some fear or some uncomfortable conversation or whatever. And live right now, live in the moment right now, complete those relationships and show up today how you should show up. I love the concept of just who you are being. Right. And it's like, you can have strategy and we need that strategy for long-term growth or whatever. Right. But at the root of it, it's like, how do you plan to walk in the conference room today? What kind of man should you show up when you walk through the door and see your family? What do you say to your wife and kids? Right? Like, be that individual right now, and don't delay it, and don't think you have to get things in place to show up a particular way. That's my take. And I think for me, that's how I ensure that I live in the present and that I find gratitude and happiness, is by living in the moment and not focus on, because I think, at least for me, that's such a natural tendency, right? It's like, well, I'll be happy after, you know what I mean? Someday, I need to do these stuff. I need it someday. It's like, no, there is no someday. There is, like, tomorrow is a word in our language that represents something that does not yet exist. There is no tomorrow, no guarantee, right? So it's like, how do we show up today? How do we find fulfillment in whatever we're doing today? And I'd say show up that way.
Awesome.
All right. Next question. Ben Farby. Well, we'll see if there's anything we would add to this. When asked to do something you don't agree with at work, specifically related to Biden's latest mandate, do you resign? It's your only income stream, but you have 6 to 12 months of savings.
You know, this is such a personal thing. It's and
depends,
you know what,
right?
This is what I was talking about earlier. This is hoping someone's going to come in for you at that difficult time and that difficult moment in your life and give you the answer. I think this is maybe one of those things for him, you know. Now,
totally.
In saying that, I would say you need to ponder it. You need to pray on it. You need to, if you don't agree and you don't want to do it, I wouldn't say you quit. I think it's more effective for you to say you're not going to do it and maybe let them fire you if that's going to be your choice. But immediately you need to be taking action to, whether it's find another job or career or do something, whatever it's going to be, to replace.
And this goes, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. This advice you would say is any scenario by which your employer is forcing you to do something that you don't want to do, right?
Absolutely, anything. Yeah. And you know, this came on people, but like you said, it's not going to happen immediately. Now, some companies are already doing this. There's, I have a friend, I live over by Amgen, and if you've never heard of Amgen, they make drugs for cancer patients, mostly cancer drugs, and they very large company, very growing company, and they one of my buddies is an executive over there, and they've already put in mandates before all this came out of they have to get vaccinated or they're fired. And he was at my house the other day and he was telling me about that. I'm like, man, how do you feel about that? And he's like, you know, I try not to feel about it because it's just something we have to do. And I'm like, but doesn't it bother you that they don't have a choice? He blankly, like, straight up looked at me and said, they have a choice. And I was like, wow, well, how do they feel then? If you're not going to tell me, if you're not going to shake, how do they feel? Because these are scientists, engineers. You were talking about not being a doctor and understanding this stuff. These guys understand it. It's stuff that they study. They understand all the language. They understand all the data. They understand the science, if you will. And they're pretty split, he said. He said some are for it, some are against it, and they all have their reasons. It's all scientific, but it's not purely, okay, we're all in, we're getting vaccinated, hoorah. It's you know, they kind of don't know, and some guys are saying, no, I'm not going to get it. And so it's really a personal choice. But like I said, I think it would be a mistake to just resign, because who knows how it's going to be implemented, like you said, if it's actually going to go down and all of that. Plus, you're losing out on any unemployment option if you quit. There's, you know, any of that stuff. And so you may still be able to collect for that if you stick around and just until they get rid of you, right? And then go from there. But in the meantime, if you're that worried about it, I would say you work extra hard on a side hustle. You know, like to the point, if you're like in a softball league or something, like you quit that league and you put all that extra time into lining something else up.
For sure. And I think it really comes down to make it your strategy, right? Don't sit back and go, oh, woe is me, right? Kind of what we've been talking about. Don't be a victim in this circumstance. Come up with your strategy. And your strategy might be, hey, I'm gonna stick this out. I'm gonna ride this out a little bit, have some plan on the back end. Or your strategy might be, hey, you know what? I've done my research. I feel good about the vaccine.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, don't be a victim of someone else's decisions, and make sure you're in line with it, and then take the necessary action to strategize to do what's best for you and your family. Really.
Yeah. And some of the if you are anti-vax, maybe you get clear on why you are.
Yeah.
There could just be these thoughts. And like you said, do that research, and maybe you figure out, you know what, this is okay. My livelihood, my family, the support of them. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. Right.
Yeah.
And you bite the bullet and do it. But again, I'm not going to make that decision for you.
Yeah, totally. All right. Dustin Madberry. I am new to the Order of Man podcast. I'm on the fence of joining the Iron Council. How do I best explain to my wife how beneficial it can be for us?
I mean, it comes down to what I said earlier, knowing what you want. And if you want to be in the IC, there's going to be a reason for it. You want to be a better man in some capacity. So know what that is and be able to go to her with that. Hey, look, I know I need to be a better husband. There's some things I think I need some help with. It'd be nice to have some support. I hear you get it in this Iron Council, and go from there. I think it'll help me career-wise. It'll help me to network. It'll help whatever you want, but you need to know those reasons so that you're clear, because the more clear you are, the easier it's going to be. Now, on the other hand, when I hear that, anytime I hear something like this, I see it all the time with people in business. They have no problem going out to dinner and dropping $200 on a dinner. Yeah. But you'd spend, honestly, I don't even know how much that IC is. When I signed up and now I know it went up, but I could care less, because it's such a drop in the bucket for the value that I get by being there, that I literally don't care. But I started doing that 22 years ago, whether it was going to Tony Robbins seminar or, anything that was going to make me better. I've gone to sales seminars and spent just tens of thousands of dollars when I was broke, spending thousands, spending hundreds that I didn't really have, but I knew what it was going to make me, who I could become by doing that. And that was more important than going out. I mentioned drinking and that kind of stuff. I took all the money that I was saving from drinking and I poured that into self-development. So, for you to spend $95 and then maybe you ask for 6 months and you say, hey, just give me 6 months, right? That's $600, let's call it, of me becoming better. Is it worth $600 for me? And maybe you do the Ben Franklin thing, right? Where you do pros and cons. Yeah. And you do that and figure out what you're going to cut out, not what you guys need to cut out as a couple, but what you're going to cut out. You know what? I spend money on this, and over 6 months, I would spend X amount on this. I'm not going to do that. And instead, I'm going to do the IC. So we're not losing any money, but this has the opportunity to make me better and improve our life together. Then maybe you do that and get those 6 months, and then you have to do it.
Yeah.
And prove it.
Well, and that's the part I'm wondering about, right? Like, how do I convince my wife to sign up for this thing that's not very expensive and it makes me a better man? I'm like, why do you need to convince her? Right. And I don't know, Dustin, right? But like, I would probably suggest that if you feel like you have to convince her, or if any guy listening, you feel like, hey, if you came to the table and said, hey, honey, I want to invest money in becoming a better man, and you have to convince her, it's probably because you've done this before. You've done the same damn thing before of like, oh, I want to do this thing because I think it's a quick fix to me becoming a better person without much effort. And you've done it and you didn't change and you didn't rise up and you didn't become a better man. And because of that, you come along and say Iron Council. She's just like, another one. Right. So if you get negative result in your ask, I would suggest that you understand why, and you really get present to how you've been showing up in the relationship that has affected her ability to trust something that you're wanting to do to become a better man, and own that. Don't make her wrong for it, but own the fact that, like, hey, you know what? You've played a part in creating that perception. And what are you going to do differently? And trust me, it's, if you are that guy and you constantly keep going to these sayings as quick fixes, guess what? Iron Council is not going to be any different for you.
Yeah.
You're going to go to the ICU, you're going to get on a team, and you're going to probably bring the team down. And you might get kicked off the team and out of the Iron Council because you're contributing 0. So what are you going to do different?
I agree.
All right. Dan, Kieran. See, I love how everyone gives me shit for not pronouncing names correctly. And I still have to pronounce the names and read the questions, even with Sean here. So I think it's the ongoing joke to let Kip slaughter names. All right. What it takes to be happy is common knowledge. I like, well, you'll see there's some benefit to this question. What it takes to be happy is common knowledge. You can Google it and you can get the same results from every list, every psychologist, every medical journal. Meditate, control what you can control, exercise, eat healthy. Yet so many of us are unhappy and struggling, so unwilling to do the things. What's the barrier between wanting to be happy and knowing what it takes and actually being willing to do those things?
The barrier, I think, is dissatisfaction. And what I mean by that is that you're not dissatisfied enough. So actually, I should probably say comfort is the barrier, because whether you realize it or not, you're comfortable. And until you get real uncomfortable, and when I say real uncomfortable enough that you want to do something about it, you're not going to. And so most people say they want to do something. They just don't want to put in the work to do it. Right. I mean, if you want to be fit, you got to work out. Everybody knows that. Just like you said, everybody knows I have to watch what I eat. I have to put better fuel into my body. I have to exercise, and I'll be more fit. I'll be healthier. I'll feel better. But I don't want to have to wake up earlier to go to the gym, or I don't want to have to start doing push-ups. And we come up with these excuses. I don't have the $60 a month for a gym membership, or whatever it is, instead of just dropping and doing a bunch of push-ups where you stand, right? Which is just as effective. And so it's putting in that work. But if you're not dissatisfied enough to where it's hard for you to move and walk, and unfortunately, that's what people wait for. They wait for something to happen in their lives to make them dissatisfied or to make them uncomfortable, and then they decide. It's like the people that quit smoking 27 times. And then a loved one dies of lung cancer. And then all of a sudden they can quit cold turkey because it's important enough for them. And so I think that's what the barrier is. You have to assess how comfortable you are. And it's probably more than you're giving yourself credit for.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting. Well, and here's a thought, right? So if this is happiness, we've described happiness as this. Meditate, control what's in your control, exercise, eat healthy. Really? How about actually make a difference in the world?
Yeah. Serve
how
people.
How about fulfillment? How about leave a lasting impact and have a legacy? That's how you live a happy life, is being fulfilled, right? Like, and these things help. Don't get me wrong. I disagree. Actually, I think these things play a part in finding happiness and fulfillment, but it's not what happiness is. I actually
think energy to do it.
Yeah, exactly. They're tools, right? But I think a life of happiness is a life of fulfillment, a life with no regret. And I'll tell you this, at least for me, I'm not going to get on my deathbed and go, oh man, you know what? I lived a great life. I meditated and I journaled and I exercised daily. No. I'm not going to feel fulfilled because I did those things. They might help, but I don't think that's where happiness is. And what's ironic, back to what you're saying, Sean, is when we are serving other individuals, when we're taking on a problem for fulfillment, Yeah, not comfortable, because you're probably tackling something that's not easy. You're taking on something that's not easy. I mean, we could just use this movement as an example, right? We could fairly say that Ryan has a level of fulfillment with starting the Order of Man movement and the impact that it's made in our lives and other men's lives through the podcast, through the Iron Council, through the Facebook group, and etc. You think that's easy? You think he wakes up going, oh man, you know what? Everything's going smooth. No, like we're tackling things that are not comfortable to tackle. We're taking on problems that are not easy to tackle. So find a problem, make it your problem, and find fulfillment. And the last thing that I always like, I have to remind myself, and I use this analogy with my kids. So my oldest son has Usher syndrome. And Usher syndrome is when you're born with a hearing loss, and then you start losing your vision later in life. And when he was 14, he started losing his vision. At this point, he has about a 5% degree of vision left. And I use this analogy with my daughters and my other kids quite a bit. I say, if Brennan woke up tomorrow and had all of his vision again, do you think he'd be happy? Do you not think tomorrow would be the greatest day of his life? But yet we wake up every morning with those, right? Every day I get to wake up and I get to see everything. I get to wake up and not have injuries that impede me from serving other individuals. So some of this is through meditation and journaling and centering ourselves and being grateful for what we have. But I really, and I don't know why I'm hesitant to accept that. It's being present is really the answer, I think. It's being present to the moment. And that present is that I have a wife that loves me, that I have these wonderful kids in my life, that I have a job that pays me good, that I'm part of something that's making a difference in people's life. That being present to that and actually living a life that's fulfilling by serving other individuals, I think that's happiness.
Yeah, I think of Helen Keller as you say that, because she was asked if it was sad for her to not be able to see and do the things that most quote unquote normal people can do. She said, you know what, I think it's more sad to have vision, to be able to see, but not have vision.
Yeah.
You know, and that's absolutely true. That's not what makes you happy, because you adapt, right? I have a friend who got her arm bit off by a shark, and she says, you know what, I have all these magnificent things that have happened in my life because my arm got bit off by a shark. You know, I don't know why God chose that to be the thing, but he did. And I've lived this magnificent life. I've been able to help other people. I'm now this adaptive athlete, and there's no hindrance to me. It's just different. And it was that adaptation and the overcoming of it and the effect I've been able to have on other people's lives because I was able to overcome it, that has made me happy, you know. Or I could have chosen to just been sad about losing my arm my whole life.
Totally. I like it. All right, Brian, maybe we'll wrap up with this one. If I have a hard stop in 10 or 15 or so, if you're good with that, Sean.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, Byron Pierce, why do you think so many people prefer the negative outlook on life? I notice people overlook the advice from people saying you can, or it's not that bad, and constantly feed on people saying it's too difficult or it's never going to get better. Everyone is just so negative.
You know, I think it's easier because being negative, it's I have this story about this optimistic son and pessimistic son. And usually I get into the long story of it, but the gist is that this dad has these two, and he's telling his friend this one day that, you know, I have these two sons are so different. They're night and day. One, there's nothing I could do to make him happy. That the other, there's nothing I could do to make him sad. I wish there was a balance in between the two. And his friend said, you know what, let me help you. But you got to let me do anything I want. He's like, sure. So next day, these trucks pull in front of the house, And one is filled with all these toys and presents and a new bike and all this stuff. And the other's filled with horse manure. And so they start unloading the horse manure and they load it into one room, and then they unload all these presents into another room. And the boys are at school and they get home from school and they go into their rooms, and the dad and his friend sit and they listen, and they're listening for the reaction. And all of a sudden they hear one boy crying, "Oh my gosh, who would do this to me? Who's tricking me? That's not fair. Why does this kind of stuff always happen to me? That's so cruel." Right. And then you hear in this other room, like, "Woohoo, woohoo." And they go upstairs and they see the crying is in the pessimistic son's room, who got all the presents. So there's a new bike and these presents, and all of a sudden he's literally saying there, sitting there sobbing in the middle of all these gifts. This is a joke. It's cruel. As soon as I open them, someone's going to take them away. Life is so cruel. People are so mean. And then from down the hall, they hear this, "Woohoo, yay, yippee, I'm the luckiest boy alive." And they go in, and it's the optimistic son. And he's literally in there throwing hay and horse manure all over the place, like throwing it up in the air. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "With all this horse manure, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere." Right. And so that story is really, now, was there a pony? No, there's no pony. So he was wrong. So the reason I say it's easier is because if you're a pessimist, you're always going to be right. You ever notice how the most negative people, like the people that complain about the most negative things happening to them, have the most negative things happening to them all the time? It's just that self-fulfilled prophecy. And being an optimist, you're not always right, but it's such a better way to live. We're talking about happiness. And that's where happiness comes from, that faith, that blind faith that things are going to be okay. It's all going to work out. That's one of my mantras. It's one of my mottos every single day. It's all going to work out. And just, I'm not always right, but holy smokes, it's so much more fun through process.
Yeah. Well, and when it does work out, that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
You know, like that's what makes it feel so great, you know?
Yeah,
like,
nailed that.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Like my wife and I, we just did Loaded-Jaw. It's a bike race from Logan, Utah to Jackson, Wyoming. And it's 208 miles. And we did a 2-person relay.
Sheesh.
And my knees hurt. And I told my wife 2 weeks ago, or about a week and a half ago, I'm like, it's not happening. Like, I can't do this relay with you. Like, my knees totally hurting. So I didn't ride a bike for the last, week and a half. And I was just like, I'm sorry, babe. Like, you're going to have someone else fill in for you or whatever. Ironically, she knows my personality well enough that she admitted this. She's like, "I knew you would go. Like, I knew you would write it because your pride, you'd show up to this race and go, screw it, I'm just going to do it." Right. And she's right. I totally did. Like, literally the night that we're driving up to Logan to spend the night and start a race at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning, the next morning, on the way up, I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll just try that first leg. I'll just do the first leg, worst case, and that first leg was 45 miles. I think I ascended 5,700 feet. Like, it was a gnarly leg. But the irony is like, halfway through that leg, I was like, I'm not finishing this race. Right. Like, I knew at that moment, like, yeah, you know what? I don't know how this is going to pan out. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to walk, how my knee's going to do, but I'm just going to do this thing. And I was committed to it. It was great to finish. Why? Because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to.
It's probably more satisfying than if you were healthy.
Exactly. That's my point. Right. It's like, man, just sometimes just putting the going to the grindstone and just going, hey, I'm going to persevere. I'm going to push through this. That's where the excitement comes from.
Yeah.
And I think, like, through my childhood, I was raised, my family's fairly poor. I have all kinds of crazy stories I could latch onto from a victimhood perspective. But you know what? All those stories, some of those best stories were hell.
Yeah.
And those are the ones I remember the most. Those were the good days. Mm-hmm. And it's ironic. That's how it works. I've taken, Boy Scouts up to, like, we did a high adventure, what they call a high adventure. It's like 50 miles in like 5-7 days or something like that. We we had an entire trip just go sideways. It was disaster after
Not a good trip
disaster.
if it doesn't.
No, it was a horrible. It held. I mean, it was just so horrible. To this day, those kids are all like, oh, I remember that trip. That trip was the best. You know, it's like, that's how, like, if we all stayed home and said, oh, you know, it's too hard, we would have never remembered those moments.
Yeah.
It's when we put it out there and we struggle. That's where the joy is.
Well, let me ask you this question. This will be my question. Now you doing that, is it just because it's your habit of, okay, this is what I do, I overcome, I don't make excuses? Or is it even another level up where you say, you know what, not only am I not going to make excuses, but I'm going to take away other people's excuses. And this is going to be a story that I'm going to get to tell. This is going to be a great story someday that I can tell people to help take away their excuse. Because I know you're in a leadership position, plus doing this, and to be able to go to people and say, hey, look, come on, this isn't that bad. Let me tell you what I've come across and been able to overcome. And
Yeah.
you think that's an element of it also?
I think it does cross my mind a little bit, like sometimes, but in those moments, like it was raining Saturday morning and we're getting soaking wet. And it was kind of like a little bit of that Goggins, you know, taking souls a little bit. I was kind of like, good. You know what I mean? Like, like bring it. Cause
getting blisters and stuff too from the
my socks was wet the whole time, but it wasn't all that bad. But my point being is I was happy because I was like, yes, like this is going to break other people. And I'm not going to get broken. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's in the moment, probably a little, dark, but I don't know. It's just something, it's kind of weird how that works.
That's great. I love it.
Cool, man. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So in closing, a couple of things came up on the call, and we actually had a couple other guys asking about like join the Iron Council. Am I ready? You know what? Are you ready to get on the court in life and actually stop being a spectator? Then join the Iron Council. And if you're not, don't. That doesn't serve us to have you join us and not be willing to put the work in and rise up. And I know that sounds a little harsh, but guess what? That's how it shows up in life too, right? If you don't plan to show up in life and actually put in the hard work, then what are you doing thinking that you should get married, let alone have children or even work for someone? Yeah. Right? Like how you show up affects all areas of your life. If you're ready to rise up and put in the necessary work, you can definitely are willing to join us or are welcome to join us in the Iron Council. To learn more about the Iron Council, go to orderman.com/Iron Council. And as always, follow Mr. Mickler on Twitter and Instagram at Ryan Mickler. And then to get your Order Man swag, which Sean and I are both, actually, I have my polo on. Darn it. So Sean's repping the hat and the shirt. You can find that swag at store.orderman.com. To follow me, you can follow me at Kip Sorensen on Instagram. And Sean, any handle that you want to add?
At Sean VMD.
All right. Awesome. Thank you guys. And until next time, and until Friday field notes, take action and become the man you were meant to be.